is up? I'm Rick, the Fat Man GM. You may or may have not have heard of me mammling and rambling on a few of the YouTube channels and Facebook channels regarding to our hobby, role-playing games in general, tabletop games, wargaming, so on, etc. I have started back when I was in my early teens. I have well over 40 years worth of experience in this hobby that we love and share. And a big part of what I like to do is go back and revisit a lot of the stuff that I have and have accumulated in my gaming career, if you will. And everything from MERP, Starfleet, from FASA, a slew of Dungeons and Dragons and Shadowrun, Star Wars, etc., etc., etc. And I revisit these items individually, and hopefully to give some nostalgia for myself, to give you a little bit of an insight into some game system that you may or may not have heard of or may have not had the opportunity to play, and to remind those of us out there that do have them that these are quite viable and still entertaining today. So here we go. And here we are. We're going to compare a couple little details between the old 3.5, which has been my standard go-to for 20 years. Yeah, I know I'm old. And the latest, what is this, 5 years old? The 5th edition, about 5 years old now, so it's not like the old thing, but it's isn't that ironic? About the time I get these things, I wonder how much shorter down the road they're going to roll this over into the 6.0, whatever that's going to be. But what difference between these two? And one of the reasons I was so slow in coming up to the because obviously I don't have any 4.0, and I have nothing against 4.0, and I ran a couple years worth of campaigns for some friends using a friend's 4.0 system, and I just couldn't force myself to go in to buy it, in part because it's a money thing. This book here, I just did a different video on shopping at my local game store, and this is a $58 book, and well, that's only $58. Okay, grant you that. Now, when I was a young man, as I said in that other video, the same price for this one book, I would have bought 5 or 6 books, a couple dice, and a couple things of lead figures, and this would have been around $20, 18, 20 bucks back in the day, because this one here was like 25, 30, maybe. So this is almost twice as costly as this one here is. 20. I'll put my glasses on because I'm getting that age. $29.95 American. So this is 30 bucks. This is $28 more expensive than this, and it was published in, what does this say? Oh, for Pete's sake, come on. Tell me you want something, you can't just turn to the page and shit. Everything else, July 2003. So this first printing was 2003, and this one was printed, so it's not even 20 years old, right? And my go-to for a long time though. 2014, so roughly 10 years between these two books, and it's almost twice as expensive, which is pathetic. So, or sad. And then the odds are, if they come out with a 6.0 and it's $70, the Fat Man's not buying it because I can't justify it. I just can't. Now, when I got all this material here, and then I guess this stuff here, we're not going to get into a diatribe, an argument about cost, but you know what I'm talking about. It's just an economics thing. When I went out and I spent about $80 on my credit card, which a good check for me is around 3 something after everything's taken out, and if you spend more than a quarter of your paycheck at a hobby on a regular basis, and I was doing that back in the day on a weekly basis, and if it wasn't this, I was buying novels and other science, fantasy, sci-fi related materials, and those too get expensive. You couldn't go to, back in the used to go to B. Dalton's. You've probably never heard of that particular bookstore. B. Dalton's and oh, there's another one out here that's still around, and I don't know the name. It's just not on my brain at the moment. And buy 2 or 3 paperback novels at $8 to $9 a piece. There's another $30. It don't take much before you're spending $200-300 a month, and you get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But what other things are you not taking care of, or not preparing yourself for, or saving for, or what have you? If you're, if you get into that kind of spending habit, I don't recommend it. So, been about 2 months since I bought my my GM guide. I think I bought 5th edition's player handbook first, then the GM guide, and so about every 2 months to go get one of these. And I don't know that there's anything left. These are the 3 core books. I might have to go look and see if they got a number. I'm sure they have a monster manual too. Like that grease on my arm. Had one little job today. It wasn't my day off, but I needed to run down to do it. You can't even touch my work truck without getting grease on you. It's just is the nature of the beast. So when I looked at that, and my reasoning is, I have so much stuff in the older versions, and they're still viable. And I hear a lot of people cry and complain, and it's the keeping up with the Joneses is part of it. And then there's the new generations that come along, and they don't clue into the older stuff because it's not available to them unless they get it secondhand or from family or something. So they buy the what's available, and they don't get attached to it like us old farts have, and that's understandable too. I think there's some stuff that gets missed out. That's one of the reasons I started doing the channel I do, for reviewing everything that I have, and I hope to work through my entire collection, Dungeons and Dragons stuff related, because there's still a lot of valuable material there. If you see them, like I said in my previous video, I picked up 3 source books for the original Shadowrun, or for Shadowrun 2.0 or whatever, for 99 cents a piece. I'm just saying. So if I was a young man getting into the game, I like that, and here's a rule book for it too for $10. Yeah, I think I would be more inclined to buy 5 or 6 of these things at $5 or $10 a piece than this particular one. But I did because I am running a play-by-post, and it's been going for almost 6 months. I started it shortly after I moved into this house, so it'll be early January, and I've had a good core group of players that are devoted to my particular style, which is very narrative heavy and rules light, which a lot of people, you're rules, you're huge on the crunchy rules, you like the crunchy rules. I do, because they serve a point and a purpose, and we're going to get into that right this minute. Yes sir, Bob. And if you stuck with me this long, run away, log out. I've already got your attention for what I needed. Okay. I got this because obviously D&D Beyond is operating under the 5.0, and I'm not adverse to their digital versions of these, which you can get cheaper, but I don't particularly care for those sort of things, because if I want to print out a hard copy, it's going to cost me quite a bit in ink and paper and effort to print their digital version onto a paper copy, because there's something about having this heft to the book, this feel to the book, and it better supports the game system and the people and the manufacturers to buy these than to buy PDFs at a discount. And I'm not averse to them. Or getting the digital versions. The other problem with the digital versions, in my opinion, is that they're really easily lost if you're not careful. And you can have them in the cloud, you can have them here, you can have them there, but if your laptop crashes and you got a lot of them there, you're hosed. Even if you back them up onto a backup, if they let you do that, because not all of them will do that, in my experience. Much harder to lose this. They can still get lost and damaged, don't get me wrong, but there's another portability. So I could be doing I have my laptop open while I'm doing my play-by-post, and I can have this on the table next to me where I'm going through, and if I have this, and I can actually have 1 or 2 other books out there referring to the material that I need. So what is that having to do with what I was just talking about how sometimes rules heavy has its advantages even in a narrative rules light campaign? All right, I have a particular NPC that I favor quite a bit in my science fiction based resource management game, I guess if you want to call it. They're called Helians, but they're based off of a lizard folk. So I wanted to modify the lizard folk template that's in our monster manual to fit the characteristics and the particularities of this lizard race. And I thought, I've been holding off, been using the monsters out of this 3.5, and when the players encounter them, even though they're using 5.0, it's kind of a kit bash, or what you all like to call homebrew today, which is whatever. So I went ahead and I thought, okay, it's time. I wanted to get out of the house a little bit and run some errands. It's been a while since we've been down at the JCD Hobby, and the wife always likes to go and look at the music CDs, so I thought, since we're out, let's just stop by there too. And I picked this up, and she got some CDs, and I picked up some other stuff. It was a pretty good day. I got home, and I pursued this, hold it open, started flipping through the pages. Batman has to have his glasses. You can't do much without them. And I thought, oh yeah, there's some beautiful artwork, and the layouts are nice, and etc. And I can't say that there's totally new stuff. Most of the people will look, oh, it's new. No, it's not new. It's just it's condensed into this from a different source. So they picked the favorites and added more, sometimes better information, sometimes not, or their layouts or what have you. But one of the things I did come across that I did like in this particular 5.0 version is that they went ahead and added a couple, depending on, I guess, let me see if I can find the goblin here, where they've added a selection of low-level, mid-level, high-level templates or ready-to-run monster. Where in the past, if you wanted to have a higher-level goblin, so to speak, you'd have to do the math work yourself. Come on, that's nice. Where are we at? Really? You're killing me here. Okay. And giants. And those fellas. Come on, you old folks. Where did these originate from? Put it in the comments. What was the first book? The first D&D or AD&D source book that have the Githyanki, or however you choose to pronounce them. Neat. Here we go. Goblins. Okay, so we got some goblins, and they give us some base information, which you can find in most of the monster manuals. And then they have the traditional low-level goblin, and then they have a goblin boss, which is a higher ranked, higher level, bit of a better challenge. This is a quarter challenge for one. This is a challenge one, and it goes in there like the orcs and stuff like that, so that having a little bit more torque. And this is one of those things that I really enjoy doing for my campaigns is, as my players level up, I have a tendency to level up their foes too. And why, the obvious progression is that you get to a point you just no longer use these unless you use these in large numbers. You move on to the next nastier or weirder or more powerful, what have you, and that's fine. But I have a tendency to want my campaigns to make the evolutions to make as much sense as the settings. So it's not likely that these things are running around in the wilderness when these guys are, and your characters or the player characters are moving back and forth through that wilderness on a regular basis. Suddenly these guys all disappear under the underbrush and these things start roaming the woods. Well, no, that doesn't make sense to me, and I'm just using that as an example. So these guys are still going to be out there. Well, they're smart enough now to avoid your group. Yeah, maybe. But what if they've got a goblin champion or a goblin lord that's much more powerful and capable? And so to get to that point, This particular version has a number of chapters that help you do that. A number of chapters worth of rules. And I'm already here, well, there's more rules, so we don't need all the heavy rules, Oh, they're so heavy. They're so complicated. I don't want to. I'm never using them. Never, because I'm an absolute, and you can go, right? Come on. You know I'm talking to, and you know if you were one of those that I'm talking to, right? It's all about absolutes, which is a crock. Hey, you don't want to do that, that's fine. If you don't want to use all the extra bells and whistles, that's fine. But the point is, and it's always been a point of mine, you can't get to advanced mathematics without learning basic math. Oh, but I can do high algebra. How did you learn high algebra if you didn't do basic math and learn advanced basic math and low-level algebra? You get my point? Not everybody is, Sheldon. We don't all have it just born in our brains, so we have to learn. And the fact that you don't always have to learn all that stuff to get to where you want to go, in part is because there's enough of this stuff that's been out there to help you build the blocks, so you can know that I need to go here to here to here. Well, I can go from here to here because I don't really need this stuff in between. But the fact that stuff that's in between allows me to go from here to here. The fact that it's in there. And then for some people, it's the aha moment. I can be going through one of these things and thinking, I don't need to know any of this. I don't care about this. Oh wait, there's something different. There's something. Why didn't I think of that before? All right, or we get into a situation, even in a narrative-heavy, rules-light, and in my play-by-post, they rarely throw dice. If you throw dice once in a counter, it's pretty credible. So you usually go 2 or 3 counters because it's mostly narratively driven, and basic things make sense. We don't need to roll to see if you were successful opening a door. If your character's clever enough to do something in verbiage, there's no necessary reason to throw the dice. On the other hand, occasionally I throw dice for the NPCs to keep it neutral. That way I'm not trying to fudge things. The actual non-player characters and bad guys have reaction rolls that I roll for, not them. I roll for them, and that's so I can honestly say that their NPC reacted to what they did in this manner. We had nothing to do with me making that decision, because that's also how I like to run things, because I'm a bit of a, I don't want you, call me what you want, right? So when I started looking in here, and I looked up lizard folk, and there was a couple of variants in there, I started realizing they don't have the, they're missing several chapters of material from what I'm used to having in my other book, and which is kind of sad. So when I look in here, they give the introduction, what is a monster, talks about statistics and size and type in armor class, and so you have a little bit of stuff here, so you can work you can elevate the existing creatures that are in here with this to some degree, if you know what you're doing. And you might not be able to have an easier time if you've never played this game before, trying to figure out how to make an 8th level goblin, as opposed to what's in here and what's here. How do I make the equivalent of an 8th level goblin or an 8th level challenge rating for a goblin? And this version has an entire chapter devoted to that particular subject. So the fact is, when we talk to that goes back to that argument of rules heavy, rules light. Well, you know what? You really can't have rules heavy if you didn't have rules light to begin with. And I love the argument. I'm sorry, I love the argument. Why is it that you can't have rules heavy without having rules light? Because rules light is what things got started on. If you go back to the original Gygax material for Dungeons and Dragons, and any other early Tunnels and Trolls and Sword and Sorcery back, Sorcery and Chivalry, or Chivalry and Sorcery, any stuff from the 70s, the rules were very, very thin. They were sometimes incomplete even then, which just kind of leads you to more questions, which eventually would be filled in with more rules, or more adaptations of the rules, or more supplements or supplication or adjustments or what have you. But that's how these things went from this to this. This is how we got from a book, original entire book player manual and campaign guide and dungeon master guide being this dang thick to just one monster manual being this thick, right? So now I need this and 2 other books like it, when I originally only needed that one book. And then so we've come full circle in some aspects, and a lot of new games today, or some of the newer games, come in with less of the mechanics. They can get away with that. And why is that? Come on, be honest. Why is it that they can get away with something that most of us don't give credit to? That's because a lot of the players, especially the veteran players and game masters, have a lot of this already embedded in their head. They've already been to basic college dungeon mastering and playering 101, and then we went to 2.0, and then to 202 and 3.3, exactly. So some of us have a bachelor's degree in gaming and dungeon mastering. Some of us have a doctorship. I'm just pointing out that you can get away with a lot of lighter material today because we already went through that heavy material stage, and it's already there and it's out there, and all you got to do is Google to get a lot of that now, right? Well, I can tell you what, 20 years ago you couldn't do that. You had to have a lot of this, and you can get away with not having a lot of this today because a lot of this is right here on this same thing you and I are having this little, one-sided conversation with, right? You can always put your comments in below and then have a conversation two-way with it. So, like I said, I looked at that, and so I was kind of surprised I didn't find them, and I don't know why I was surprised, because I understand that each version is different. So instead, they added a section back here, this is an appendix, right? Where we've got customizing NPCs. So this is basically where we take some of them, not all of the critters, but some of them, and can create a template using them, and or these are ready-made templates for existing characters or non-player characters that you can tap into as needed, which is a nice little addition. I've absolutely no problem with that. So I'm going to shove that over there for the moment, and we are all familiar with, those of us who are familiar with this one anyway. Now, if you look in the front, you've got a little bit of the same stuff: introduction, statistics, explaining stuff like reach and challenge ratings, and so on and so forth. But it's when you start to get into the final chapters. Alright. Chapter 3, because Chapter 2 is just general animals. That's an encounter that a lot of people tend to ignore, and I find that sad. I think those are the most common encounters that you should have encounters with, and they don't have to hunt you down or you hunt them down, but they can be a challenge of some degree, or a small problem. And some people don't like that. I guess Chapter 4. Chapter 3 is a vermin. There we go. Alright, so Chapter 4 is improving the monsters, or basically improving everything that's in the front of this book. So we can ability score, monster class and levels, increasing the hit die, reading a template, adjusting, making them more powerful, more stronger, more potent. Here's an example of a monster advancement, adding a template step by step, challenge, advanced monster challenge rating. The idea being is that just because the low-level monsters, they're critters, they're humanoids or whatever, at the beginning of your campaign, there's a real challenge to low-level characters, should suddenly be diminished to the point of being not worth even sneezing at. Well, that's I think a common mistake to make. I think that there's room to have a pyramid, so you got all these low-level goblins, and at some point somewhere up there's going to be a goblin champion that's 4th or 5th or 8th level, and not only do the goblin champion have better stats and better hit points and etc, 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 they should also utilize better equipment. They should have magic weapons. They should have better armor. This is stuff that their tribe has looted or raided or pillaged or taken off the dead, and because the goblin's a much more potent and powerful individual, he just claims it and says, hey, that's for me, and he gains advantages. That's another thing that's always buggered me in a lot of GM campaigns that other players or other GMs have ran that I've played in, is the aside from the Monty Hall aspect, that's a different topic altogether. But when you overcome a beastie thing, a creature or a humanoid or what have you, and you kill them or you capture them, whatever, you knock them out, whatever, and you strip them and you look for their value, whatever valuables they're carrying. So let's say one of them, your goblin champion that you just bested, who almost took off your leg and reduced half your hit points and actually gave you a heck of a fight. Turns out his sword or his axe is a +1 weapon, and maybe he's got a ring of, he's got a ring of shielding or warding on his hand that's helping him out. Maybe something that's giving him a little better intelligence, that boost. Those items. So when you roll randomly for the treasure that they're supposed to have, and having, he's just carrying a +1 sword around in his pack. No, fool. No, he's carrying that +1 sword in his hand. It's better than any goblin-made weapon. Why would he not do that? If it fits in his hand, he can carry it. All right, so in his case, it'd be, for a regular human, it'd be a short sword or a really good-sized dagger. Who cares? The point is, he'd be utilizing it, and that's the way it ought to have been utilized in the campaign, in the game, in my opinion. Of course, always just the fat man's opinion, and how you do and don't do is always right. It's your game, and there's no wrong when it comes to how you run your game and how you utilize the rules and how you benefit from them. All I'm just sharing is my experiences and my opinions and thoughts, and if they find them useful, you're probably already doing some of what I'm saying anyway, or if not all of it, or have and went on to something better. And you're more than welcome to run your own channel or put comments down here and tell me what you do so I can learn and benefit from them experience too. And that's how we all get a leg up, right? So in that mindset, the other side of treasure is, well, there's a treasure in their lair, and there's a treasure that they carry, and some variants and various rule books and game systems don't make a difference. They don't tell you the difference, and that's kind of something you kind of learn in your head. You should make sense. I mean, the dragon isn't lugging his treasure around with him. It might have a few bits and pieces of it stuck between his scales, and maybe some the odd magic item or something that got snagged on his something. But the lion's share of it's going to be a hoard hidden somewhere. So unless you go beard the dragon in his own den or her own den, and then acquire it that way and deal with all the problems that rises and should brawl, because that should be an entire different campaign in and of itself. And I've done that before, and it turned out to be quite an interesting campaign that one was. But the goblins have got a goblin tribe. The tribe's usually got a hideout somewhere or a lair or what have you, and most of the valuables are going to be there hidden, because they don't value the valuables as we do, as humans do. So having a pile of gold coins is because it's valuable, because everybody knows it's valuable, and the goblins are not stupid, but they don't have a coin-based economy themselves, unless of course in your campaign world they do, and I've also done that before. So it's just a matter of how you want to look at that sort of thing. But like I said, so we've got this whole chapter 4, improving monsters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages that is not in here. And you might, we don't need it. Fine, but I do, and I know a lot of other people do or want it and can make benefit of it, and it should have been in there. And if it's not, my gut tells me that they've moved these to another book. So you buy this one, now you need to go get Monster Manual 2 or some other supplement, because it'll have that or updated version of this stuff in that book. So it's a marketing ploy to sucker you into buying another $60, $70 book, $50 book, and you may not see it the way I see it, and you're entitled to it. So we have Chapter 5, Making Monsters. All the really great monsters in a D&D game and in literature have one thing in common. You can sum up what they're all about to do in just a few words. That's the first and most essential item in any monster recipe. A solid and fairly simple statement of what the monster is all about. The monster's concept, determining what type it is it aberration, construct, giant, dragon, humanoid, fae, etc., etc. So you're going to quantify it so you can give it figure out what category it belongs to, and then give it a challenge rating, and creating the monster creature type, size, hit die, subtype, average hit dice, etc., etc., armor class, ability scores, attack, full attack, special attacks, special qualities, skills, space, reach. So we have chapter 5, Making Monsters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8-page chapter that's not in that book, which is sad. And then chapter 6, Monster Skills and Feats. This is the ability to take the existing what have yous, if they're pliable, because there are certain creatures and monsters that really kind of hard to upgrade them, and maybe even foolhardy at best, but you can add additional feats. You level them up, give them additional advantages and abilities. It's only a couple pages, it's 2 pages, but having my goblin champion, let's say, give him a couple feats, and then they talk about how to play test them and compare them and make sure that the monster's functioning well, and so on and so forth. I have taken a lot of the feats and skills and stuff out of the player handbook and utilize that when I'm creating, especially if the beast or the humanoid or whatever is considered a quote playable race or an intelligent race, because, well, a beholder is not really a good player type character to allow your players to operate. Just saying, but they are an intelligence, most of them anyway, and some of them much more than others, so there's no reason they can't advance and grow and add additional abilities and quote feats and things like that, so they can, but they would be appropriate to them. So flying feats, evasion, defense, adding skill sets, things like that make perfect good sense for up armoring or up challenging a beholder, if you really need to do that with a beholder. It's bad enough, 1 or 2 I got one beholder and he's bad enough. I throw 3 of them in a room. Usually I don't need to worry about having a beholder boss, if you will. So that's my thought on that, and as always, welcome your comments, your thoughts. Preferred not to get absolutes. If you must, you must, but I would like to have, I don't like it because, I just flat out say I don't like it, I don't use it, I won't use it. But why won't you use it? What is your reasoning? I mean, is it a solid basis, or just because you're lazy? Maybe just lazy, or you don't want to be bothered by all the extra rules. You don't like you don't like that heft and heaviness. And in some cases, a lot of players, especially in the narrative stuff, people are playing more. A larger number of players now play rules like narrative heavy style story, telling the story for the sake of the story. We're adventuring because of the story, and we're creating a story. We're spinning a story through our actions and our adventures, and so on and so forth. That's fine. Not having the material available to you, if you don't need it, you don't need it, but the fact is there. And a lot of what we can do today is grown on top of what we did yesterday. So I go back to the old school stuff from 30 odd years ago, and I think of some of my earliest game campaigns and the game campaigns I played in. It was all about resource management and not narrative, but simulation style, and we we had our characters, and they had their names, and maybe they had a little backstory, maybe they didn't. The story was whatever we were doing at that day, and while we were playing, and we were entertaining each other and being entertained, and that was the story. But then, as some of us have gotten older, we've gotten more sophisticated, we've grown, and we've had children, and we introduced our children and our friends' children to the gaming industry. A lot of them have a leg up than what we did when we were their age, and especially now, the third generation, fourth generation coming up with all the the technology and the videos and that's out there. That was another kind of reasoning for putting this channel together and doing what I'm doing. It's a bit of a legacy. So my career and this lifetime hobby that I've spent so much time and effort and resources into developing myself is not a total waste of time. So some people will get some entertainment out of what I do, some of them will get some nostalgia out of what I'm doing, and maybe a few people will pick up a hint or an idea, or stir a concept for them to improve in their own game, or to go off into something different from what they do. So my argument stands that sometimes the old stuff is just as valuable as the new stuff, and there's nothing wrong with the new stuff, and the new stuff keeps things fresh and brings new perspective and new flair and flavor to the old stuff. The old stuff is the foundation by which the new stuff can stand on, right? So when we're looking at the latest version of something and we slide it down just a hair, and we see, look, it's built on a solid foundation of multiple generations of this. So the same goes with clones or other games that work in a similar venue. So I like to pick on Pathfinder, because you know what, when I see Pathfinder on the shelf at JCD and I see it next to the Pathfinder, and it's so humid outside, my heat ducts are dripping moisture out of them occasionally, that it pretty much looks, here's the D&D shelf, here's the Pathfinder shelf, and to me they look pretty much the same, right? So, till next time.